Good evening. My name is Araceli Galvis and I'm a student at Western Governors University. And today my presentation is entitled, How Can Intervention Programs Benefit Survivors of Abuse? This presentation is geared towards empowering survivors of abuse to seek professional and emotional support, but also analyze that those who have not dealt with the trauma of the abuse, and many times they will be involved in self-destructive behaviors, which ultimately can cause an emotional disconnect between them and their children. When we think of the term abuse, it is important to understand that abuse could be physical, verbal, emotional. It could include neglect, and in certain cases, it can even be sexual. Statistically, it has been shown that 1 out of every 3 girls and 1 out of 5 to 7 boys will experience some form of abuse or neglect before the age of 18. Because these staggering numbers, it has been important for the Department of Children and Families to be able to create community-based programs to be able to bring awareness in the topic of abuse. The goal of these programs is to be able to empower parents and children to recognize the signs of abuse, to ultimately stop it from happening, but also to be able to strengthen relationships between parents and their children. Unfortunately, adults who have not dealt with the effects of their personal experiences, they try to mask their shame through self-destructive behaviors. And by that, I mean, many of them will be involved in excessive drinking, drug use, or sexual promiscuity. Now, these types of behaviors will also create an emotional disconnect between them and their children, but it also serves as a model that their children may imitate throughout their adult life. And what we see without the proper intervention, this will cause a cycle of abuse from one generation to the next. On the other hand, having the support of others who have dealt with these same types of experiences can actually help survivors of abuse deal with the hopelessness or not feel so isolated, thinking that something like this has only happened to them. So it is essential for parents to seek help from professionals or supportive members of the community so that they can learn practical parenting skills and become better parents while trying to cope with the trauma of their own abuse. There was an article that was published in the web journal called The Conversation, where author John McLuhan stated that many programs come in to educate children in regards to nutrition, exercise, wearing seatbelts, or even smoking tobacco. But every single year, there are more cases of children being hurt because of abuse or neglect than in car accidents or fires alone. So if these topics are so important to educate kids, what makes us think that the topic of abuse should be any less important? Also interesting enough, Dr. Charles L. Whitfield had discussed a study that had occurred a few years back where 17,000 people who were survivors of some form of traumatic experience through their childhood, it was linked to also adverse experiences in their adulthood. As you can see here, it says child adversity has lasting impact. It could be physical, it could be emotional. Many survivors of abuse suffer from depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, post-traumatic stress disorder. They also are more prone to be able to have diseases throughout their adult life, like cancers, diabetes, more prone to be able to utilize alcohol and drugs to be able to cope with the effects of the abuse or the trauma that they have dealt with. But it's also important for us to understand that this reiterates the importance of adults who have experienced some form of trauma in their childhood seeking professional help to ensure that they do not fall in this vicious cycle. Also, we realize that when we talk about surviving abuse, it should never be that they feel hopeless and that there's nothing that they can do to overcome these traumas. But first of all, especially when a parent has experienced these types of trauma in their childhood, they can realize that this can affect their parenting skills and also not serve as a positive role models for their children. In a University of Washington Social Development Research Group stated that adults who have been exposed to physical and emotional abuse during their childhood are most likely to repeat these types of behaviors with their own children. And it is clear that these types of behaviors are learned, and although it is challenging to make changes, it is not impossible as long as the parent is willing to recognize that they need help and also take responsibility for their own actions and also move forward in seeking the help that they need to be able to ensure that they can continue becoming positive role models for their children and also eliminating any negative thoughts that they may have. Also, it is clear that survivors of abuse need to seek educational and psychological programs to help them cope with these type of traumas that they endured as children. Therapy is very important, but also emotional support throughout the community is something that can benefit survivors of abuse to make them feel less isolated or alone when it comes to dealing with the trauma linked to adverse childhood experiences. Dr. Shirley Beeman really reiterated the importance of seeking professional help. She herself, as a child, had endured emotional and physical and, in certain cases, sexual abuse at the hands of her own mother. And she realizes that her journey to recovery was not easy. And one of the things she realized also that the first step is realizing that you need help. And to be able to heal from past trauma, she realizes that seeking help and talking to others about what you endured helps you with the process of healing. And in her professional opinion, survivors of abuse who do not deal with these traumas, again, will become repeat offenders or may fall in self-destructive behaviors. Beeman states, child abuse is a multi-generational process. It keeps going and going unless individuals in society do something to stop it. The topic of child abuse cannot continue to be taboo. The more we create consciousness throughout the community about this serious subject, the greater chances we have in finding a solution. Lastly, we need to understand that no one ever is a lost cause. And we want to bring awareness throughout the community about the importance of dealing with these traumas, and it will help us better ourselves as humans. Thank you.